Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, King Xerxes ruled in the citadel of Susa, a beacon of power within the Persian Empire. The opulence of the palace stood in stark contrast to the whispered fears of the people, particularly among the Jews, who dwelled in secret, their identity hidden beneath layers of skin and silk. Among them was Esther, a young woman whose beauty had captivated the king and whose heart carried the burden of her heritage, a heritage now marked for destruction by the evil Haman. Draped in splendid garments, she walked the immense halls of the palace, each echoing step a reminder of the peril that awaited her people. The scrolls of decree lay heavy on her soul, for the wicked plot against her kind was woven into the fabric of the kingdom. The magnificent chandeliers above her sparkled with light, yet within her dwelled a darkness, an urgent call to action she could not escape. Esther reflected often on her family's faith, stories of Yahweh's covenant whispered through generations like embers of hope flickering in a shadowy night. The remembrance of Mordecai's words pierced her thoughts like a sharp arrow. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther 4:14 ESV. In the scant hours before dawn, these ancient words tugged at her heart, guiding her towards the precipice of her destiny. A restless spirit pressed upon her as she stood in the hushed chamber, illuminated by the moon's glow, filtering through the delicate latticework. The magnitude of her responsibility weighed on her, a realization that she could be the only one to plead for her nation. Yet the thought of approaching the king without invitation sent tremors through her being. It could seal her fate, an uninvited guest met only with scorn, or worse, death. Each soft rustle of her maidens, their laughter tinkling like distant chimes, seemed a cruel reminder of the joy that enveloped her newfound status as queen, while the fate of her people hung by a thread. Adorned in finery, she felt starkly aware of her true identity, a Jewess enshrined within the walls of Persia. On the very threshold of the king's presence, she could feel the clash of fear and courage stir within, waging a battle for her soul. Before she could prepare herself to enter the king's court, the silence of prayer enveloped her like a sacred veil. She knew that the power to change the grave decree lay not in herself, but in the hands of the Almighty. With fervor, she initiated a fast drawing closer to the God who commanded the cosmos and who held lives in his omnipotent grasp. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. Just as the sun blushed across the horizon, painting the palace in hues of golden hope, Esther gathered her resolve. Would the king receive her? Would she find favor and a way to intercede for her beloved people? With the weight of eternity pressing upon her heart, Esther stepped forward into the light, the fate of her nation hanging delicately in the balance. The grand doors of the throne room pushed open, and she entered, trembling under sacred expectation. What divine plan awaited as she stood before the mighty Xerxes? As Esther entered the throne room, the air thickened with tension. The opulent tapestries that adorned the walls whispered tales of grandeur, but her heart raced, knowing she stood before the king, unbidden and vulnerable. Xerxes, enthroned in his radiance, turned his gaze upon her, and for a fleeting moment, time seemed suspended. Would he extend the golden scepter, or would her boldness lead to her undoing? Esther approached cautiously, her heart a kaleidoscope of fear and anticipation. Within her spirit, fervent prayers ascended to the heavens, beseeching Yahweh for wisdom and courage. "If I perish," I perish, she whispered inwardly, summoning strength from the depths of her faith. Queen Esther, Xerxes exclaimed, his tone a blend of surprise and curiosity. What is it that troubles you? Even half of my kingdom will be given to you. His words were like balm, yet Esther knew the weight of what she was about to request was far more precious than silver or gold. With a steady breath she replied, If it pleases the king, let my request be known. I have prepared a feast to honor you and Haman, and there I will reveal my heart's desire. The king's brow furrowed with intrigue, and he nodded, summoning his most trusted adviser, Haman, to join them. As the banquet unfolded beneath the glittering chandeliers, Esther watched the king and Haman, her heart pounding like the drums of war. The fragrant dishes laid before them spoke of luxury, yet they seemed a stark contrast to the bitterness that awaited her people. With each sip of wine and each morsel taken, the weight of her responsibility grew heavier, swirling in her mind like a mighty storm. At last, as they reclined upon their couches, the king turned his attentive gaze towards Esther, compelling her to speak. "What is your wish, my queen?" he urged, his voice laced with concern. With strength that felt like it came from another realm, she rose to address her husband. "O King Xerxes, if I have found favor in your sight, and if it pleases my king, I would implore you to spare my life and the lives of my people, for we have been sold to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." Her voice rang clear as a bell, slicing through the heaviness of the air. Xerxes, bewildered, leaned forward, his countenance shifting from confusion to wrath. "Who is this vile man who would dare to harm you and your people?" he thundered. "An adversary, an enemy," Esther declared, her eyes steely and fierce. "This wicked Haman." The name rang out like a death knell, echoing through the throne room and shaking the very foundation of the Persian court. Haman, rendered speechless, trembled as he realized the trap into which he had walked. The king's face burned with fury, and as the tables turned within that sacred chamber, the truth enveloped all present like a divine gale. In that moment, dramatic resolve filled the air. The fate of an entire race hung by a thread, shifting towards hope with the unfolding of the sovereign plan. And as Haman's treachery was laid bare, the relentless execution of vengeance held its breath, waiting for the final decree. But what hung on the precipice of revelation was not merely the deliverance from death, but the awakening knowledge that this was the beginning of God's profound design. Each twist and turn of fate revealed his eternal purpose, a promise unfurling as intricately as the royal tapestry that adorned the walls. For little did they know, the schemes of man would play into the hands of the Almighty, shaping events that would echo throughout generations, for a divine plan awaited, a deliverance tethered to the heart of God's people. What more awaited to unfold in this narrative of redemption? As the echoes of Esther's declaration faded into the heavy air of the throne room, Xerxes turned towards Haman, his eyes blazing with indignation. "What is this you have done?" he demanded, his voice reverberating like thunder. The court officials and dignitaries, witnesses to this divine confrontation, held their breaths, sensing the moment teetering on the edge of judgment. Haman, realizing the gravity of his betrayal, became a picture of dread. His heart sank, for he understood that the wrath of the king was not to be trifled with. He fell to the ground, prostrating himself before Esther, pleading for his life. "Queen Esther," he cried, "I was only following the king's command. Let not your heart be burdened with my error." But Esther stood firm, drawing strength from the tapestry of her faith, stitched upon the looms of her ancestors. "Your wickedness is laid bare," she proclaimed, "and your deceit shall no longer prosper." Her voice, though soft, wove threads of courage that curled through the air, intertwining with the spirit of the living God. Xerxes turned away from Haman, his heart heavy and torn. To him, the queen's plea echoed with divine urgency. "Was it not you who sought to destroy my queen's people? A decree has been written. What man would dare to carry out such treachery? He shouted, summoning his officers to witness the betrayal of Haman. With furious resolve, the king stood, a mighty ruler confronting foul treason. Hang the very man who sought the end of the innocent. He pointed towards the gallows Haman had built, unaware that his own edict would lead to a grand reversal of fortunes. As Haman was led away in chains, Esther could feel the outpouring of both fear and fervent hope in her spirit. She approached the king once more, this time with a heart alight with righteousness and an unshakable determination. "O king," she implored with humility, "allow me to plead further. Let not the decree against my people remain unaltered. For although Haman's life comes to an end, the day of doom for my people is still written in the annals of your kingdom." Xerxes sat back upon his throne, his mind racing, overwhelmed by the gravity of each pending decision. What shall be done, he pondered aloud, seeking guidance from the counselors who had remained sentinel to the unfolding drama. The law cannot be revoked. It has been sealed with the king's own signet. Esther sensed the shifting winds of fate and took a bold step closer, her heart a vessel of divine resolve. "If it pleases the king, let a new decree rise to alter the course of this calamity. Let my people be granted the right to defend themselves against those who rise against them, for this is a time of peril." A hush fell over the court as the king considered her words. In that pregnant silence, the memory of God's promises danced in Esther's heart. The sovereignty of the Lord flowed through her veins, leading this moment towards a magnificent revelation. "Then let it be so," Xerxes decreed, the authority in his voice casting shadows of fear and hope alike. "Whoever harms the Jews within my kingdom shall face the wrath of those they intended to destroy." A new dawn was breaking over the land, where despair had threatened to swallow hope, and as the decree was recorded, the reality of the queen's courage was a testament to the sovereignty of God at work. For to their astonishment, the unfolding events, a simultaneous act of judgment and deliverance, pointed to a greater purpose, a divine plan intertwined with the survival of a faithful remnant, a plot of love and compassion woven into the very fabric of Israel's heart. But even as victory loomed, a whisper of divine intrigue lingered. Could this act of night and day, revealing the faltering pages of history, fulfill the promise that echoed since times of old? What other marvels lay in wait, waiting for the perfect moment to unfold God's redemptive story? So it came to pass that the king's decree was sent out swiftly, affixed with the signet of Xerxes, spreading its wings across the vast expanse of his empire. Messengers rode forth on swift steeds, carrying the words that would breathe new life into the hearts of the weary Jews, bringing news of both liberation and hope. On that day, the people of Israel, who had trembled in fear and despair, lifted their eyes to the heavens, recognizing the hand of the Almighty in their midst. The promise of the Lord echoed through the chambers of their hearts, rekindling the flame of faith that seemed all but extinguished. Some sought each other in the streets, whispering, "The God of our ancestors has moved. We shall not perish." Esther watched as the shadows of fear began to lift from the faces of her people. The decree granted them the right to gather and prepare for their defense against the enemies that had plotted against them. There was a unity in the air, a resolve that bound their hearts together like the threads in Esther's woven tapestry. Then came the day of reckoning, and all who wished to harm the Jews now quaked in their boots, for the decree was more than mere words. It was a manifestation of divine favor and protection. The very face of Haman's treachery was marred as his downfall loomed larger still in the eyes of those around him. The noise of preparation filled the city, a hum of anxious energy as plans unfolded and the people readied themselves for confrontation. Mothers gathered their children and fathers sharpened swords. They would not meet their end without a fight. Each house echoed with the declaration of God's steadfast love, recalled in the prayers and chants of deliverance from generations past. But even as Esther's heart rejoiced, a still small voice whispered of greater trials yet to come. A gnawing uncertainty stirred within her spirit. Would the surge of newfound strength be enough? Did they truly grasp the weight of their collective fate? Would they rise together, united as one, or would discord within fracture the promise of deliverance? In the palace, the king pondered the fate of his empire, aware that his throne was set upon unfathomable foundations. The sun had risen on a new day, yet the spectre of hidden intentions haunted the shadows. Filled with unease, he sought counsel from his advisers, whose voices clamored in panic once the whispers of unrest reached their ears. What shall we do against such a tide of resistance? Esther, rising early the next day, fell upon her knees before the Lord, seeking divine clarity. O God of Israel, hear my plea. Guide my people as they rally for their lives. May their hearts be strong, not led astray by fear or rancor. And in the stillness of her devotions, clarity descended upon her soul. She recalled the words of the prophet, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1:9. Yet unbeknownst to all, a deeper plot was unfolding in realms unseen. The conflict was not merely flesh and blood. This was a clash against the very principalities of darkness, seeking to extinguish the light of God's chosen people. As the fateful day approached when the Jews would rise and fate would hang in the balance, one question lingered in the hearts of many. Could this moment in history be but the prelude to the greater acts of God? What divine glory awaited just beyond the horizon? And what role would each of them play in the unfolding tapestry of his sovereign plan? In this great clash of titans, the echoes of eternity whispered, drawing near to the hearts of those willing to listen, revealing glimpses of the magnificent tapestry God weaves, where faith and courage converge in the name of redemption and hope. As the dawn broke on the day of destiny, the city of Shushan breathed a heavy sigh, caught in the throes of anticipation. The streets that had once held shadows of despair now shimmered with a flicker of hope, as the people of Israel gathered in strength, their determination palpable in the morning air. Each heart beat in rhythm with the covenant promises reverberating through their lineage, echoing the words of the Lord spoken through generations. "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord, "plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. Across the expanse, the banners signaling the unity of the Jewish people unfurled, vibrant against the rising sun. With each stride, mothers held their children close, and fathers, emboldened, clasped their weapons tightly, ready to defend not just their lives, but their shared heritage and the very essence of their identity as God's chosen ones. Yet unbeknownst to them, hidden in the palace of Xerxes, dark schemes twisted like a serpent, coiling tighter around the heart of Haman. The plotting of the wicked had not ceased. His rage against Esther's people simmered and broiled, seeking desperate refuge in the shadows. "This is not an ending, but a beginning," he hissed to his confidants, his eyes blazing with a malevolence fueled by the strivings of darkness. "I will not be betrayed by a mere decree." As the appointed hour drew near, Esther's spirit was both emboldened and trembling. She stood at the threshold of her great purpose, her heart a tempest of faith and fear. The words from her nightly prayers echoed within her, "If I perish, I perish." With a steadfast gaze towards the heavens, she resolved to step forward into the living light of God's decree. Amidst an orchestration of voices, Esther called upon the leaders of the Jews. "Hear me, O my people. The Lord has granted us this day, a day to defend our lives, a day to stand firm against the enemies who seek our destruction. We must not cower in despair. This is the hour of our salvation." A reverent hush fell over the crowd as they listened, eyes aglow with renewed courage. It was then that she spoke the unyielding truth that would ignite their spirits. "Remember, The Lord fights for you. As he did for our fathers, so shall he do for us. Who among us can stand against his mighty hand? Cheering rose as the people shouted, We are his, we will not fall, for the Lord is our refuge and strength. With hearts inspired, they prepared themselves not just for battle, but for a testament to their faith, a testimony of trust that the Creator of the universe would guide them. In the inner recesses of the palace, Xerxes felt the weight of the nation's fervor, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Confusion clouded his mind as whispers of unrest brushed against the edges of his ear. Little did he know, his heart was being pulled along the divine string of Providence, an unwitting participant in a greater narrative at work, woven by the hands of the Almighty. As deeds unfolded on the ground and prayers soared upward like incense, the realities of struggle and victory stood poised on the scale of divine justice. For even as Esther readied to confront Haman, unseen forces conspired above, pulling all threads toward a climax foreseen before the dawn of creation. Could it be that the very threads of destiny would intertwine that day, culminating in an act that would echo through eternity? What revelation awaited in the shadows? The time had drawn near, and this battle was not merely for their lives, but a testament of faith, standing true against the tapestry of God's sovereign will. What would their courage unleash, not only for the moment, but for all ages to come? As the sun fully rose, enveloping Shushan in its golden embrace, Esther, donning her royal attire, approached the palace. With steady resolve cemented by faith, she crossed the threshold of the king's court, where Xerxes sat upon his throne, resplendent in his majesty. The weight of the moment pressed upon her soul, an appointment ordained by the divine. The atmosphere in the palace was thick with tension. Every noble present felt the undercurrents of unrest. As Esther entered, the court fell silent. All eyes turned toward her. In that moment, she truly understood the gravity of her call. No longer just a queen adorned with jewels, she was a sentinel bearing the cries of her people. Xerxes, startled by her sudden appearance, furrowed his brow. "What is it, Queen Esther? What troubles you?" His voice echoed within the vast chamber, reverberating off marble and gold. With unwavering eyes she stepped forward, and in a voice imbued with both fear and strength proclaimed, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, let my life be spared, and the life of my people, for we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." Gasps filled the court, a tumult of whispers rising as the truth of her declaration sank in. The king's anger ignited, flames burning behind his eyes. "Who is he, and where is he? Who would presume to do such a thing?" With a heart racing like the wings of a dove, Esther pointed to Haman. "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." The eyes of the court turned to Haman, who stood frozen, realization dawning with horrifying clarity upon him. The ambitious man who had sought to exterminate Esther's people now felt the weight of his treachery closing in around him like a vice. His countenance blanched, fear gripping his heart. In that moment, divine justice loomed as an impending storm. Xerxes rose in fury, his voice thundering through the hall. "Take Haman! Let him be hanged on the gallows that he has prepared for Mordecai!" The decree fell like lightning, and terror seized Haman's very soul. In the face of the impending execution, he fell at Esther's feet, pleading for mercy. "Spare me, O queen. I meant no harm to you or your people." His voice, once authoritative, now trembled with desperation. Esther, moved by the gravity of his plea, remained steadfast. The cries of her people rose within her, a tide of fervor and the promise of hope. "The Lord is my strength. Whom shall I fear? The battle belongs to him," she declared, her faith defiant against the darkness that encroached. Xerxes commanded, "Let the gallows be prepared." As the soldiers dragged Haman away, Esther remained resolute, her spirit bolstered by the assurance of God's providential plan unfolding before her. And so, Providence wove its intricate patterns in the shadows of despair, with Esther's courage igniting the spark of divine intervention. The very fate of a nation hinged upon one faith-filled act, a step into the unknown. In the days that followed, as the proclamation reverberated through the streets, Israel would learn the depths of their deliverance, and the consuming darkness could be blotted out by the splendor of God's light. For from the ashes of despair, a new dawn was poised to rise. What awaited in the higher courts of heaven the assembly of divine watchers, as Haman's treachery was met with divine condemnation? Could it be that in this moment of reckoning the threads of destiny intertwined yet again, revealing a greater tapestry designed for the redemption of a people? Only time would unveil the fullness of God's sovereign purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a crimson hue across the land, the fate of every soul in Shushan trembled in the balance. Haman, now a prisoner of his own wickedness, was led to the gallows he had constructed for Mordecai, a direct reflection of the unraveling of his dark intentions. Esther, her heart still pounding from the tumult of the day, withdrew to her chambers. There she lay prostrate upon the cool stone floor, seeking the face of the Almighty. With palms pressed against the earth, she poured out her soul in earnest prayer. The anguish of her people gripped her heart. O Lord, do not hide your face from us. Hear the lament of your servants, and deliver us from the pit of sorrow. Her voice echoed against the cold walls, piercing the silence of night, while a sense of urgency enveloped her spirit. She remembered the promises spoken through the prophets, promises of deliverance and restoration that would not fail. As she prayed, the words of Jeremiah lingered in her mind. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. In that sacred space of seeking and supplication, the weight of the moment resonated in her spirit, and she stood as a beacon of hope for her people. Meanwhile, in the palace, Xerxes, troubled by dreams that eluded him, summoned his advisers to recount the chronicles of the kingdom. Reading aloud, the scroll spoke of a time when Mordecai had exposed a plot against the king's life. "What honor and recognition has been bestowed upon this man for his loyalty?" the king inquired, a deep yearning for justice rippling through him. His servants were quick to reply, "Nothing has been done for him." As the king turned this thought over in his mind, the shadows of Haman's impending demise cast a long, foreboding shadow upon them all. He asked, "Who sits in the court?" "Here is Haman," they replied, unaware of the brewing storm. The king, filled with inspiration, called for Haman, who entered with a swagger of arrogance, unaware of the reckoning awaiting him. "What shall be done for the man my king delights to honor?" Xerxes posed, veiling his true intentions. Haman, presuming the honor was for himself, envisioned grand gestures. "Let them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, and let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man, and lead him on horseback through the city, proclaiming before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'" "Go quickly," said Xerxes, as his heart stood on the brink of judgment. "Take the robe and the horse, and do as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew." His proclamation rang like a trumpet call through the palace, shaking Haman to his very core. The realization struck Haman like a hammer to the head. The very man he sought to annihilate was now to be honored, while his own doom awaited him. As he begrudgingly led Mordecai through the streets in royal garb, the paradox of fate tightened around him like a noose. All heaven watched as the tapestry of destiny unfurled, intertwining Haman's ambition with divine justice. Each step that Mordecai took brought glory to God, and every cry of, "This is how the king rewards the faithful," pierces the heart of Haman's arrogance. In this hour of reckoning, The whispers of God's sovereign plan unfurled amidst chaos, an inevitable collision of evil's end and righteousness' ascendance. Would the fate of a nation rest upon the shoulders of its king's judgment, or would the true king of all creation bring forth redemption through his chosen vessel? As night enveloped Shushan once more, the divine clock ticked closer to the unfolding of God's promise. A promise to finalize the purpose for which Esther was born. What deeper layers of spiritual warfare and divine destiny would soon emerge as the court of Xerxes prepared to witness the collapse of Haman and the rise of God's deliverance? The resolution lay beyond the horizon, waiting to be revealed. As dawn's first light crept over the land, a somber silence settled upon Shushan, heralding a day that would reshape histories. Haman, his heart filled with despair, was led away from the streets where he had belligerently demanded honor, now trudging in humiliation toward the gallows. The bitter irony hung thick in the air, each step reminding him of the gallows he had constructed for another. In the court of Xerxes, the atmosphere crackled with expectancy, the unfolding of divine providence imminent. Amidst this turmoil, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, bearing honor where once he had known scorn. His spirit, once burdened, lifted as he remembered the sweetness of the promise, God's assurance of deliverance. News of the king's decree had spread like wildfire, igniting hope among the Jewish people who had languished under the threat of annihilation. Each heart beat with the rhythm of redemption, and their cries of despair had lifted to heaven, where their prayers met divine ears. Meanwhile, Esther emerged from her chambers, her countenance radiant yet solemn. The echoes of her desperate prayers resounded in her mind, steeped in the mercies of God. She took her place among her people, her very presence a testament to divine orchestrations. The Spirit of the Almighty hovered among them, carrying wisdom that transcended the whispers of fear that had once consumed their hearts. "If you remain silent at this time," she murmured, "relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's family will perish." Esther 4:14. In the throne room, Xerxes, attuned to the murmurs of his kingdom, summoned his officials. His authoritative voice pricked the ears of all present. "What is this plot devised against my loyal subjects? What shall be done to rectify the impending doom?" His brow furrowed, a king grasping at the fringes of a righteous fury that stirred within. News of the plot crafted by Haman had seeped into his very bones, and with each passing moment an urgency gripped him. He summoned the royal scribes, commanding the writing of an edict that would reverse the fate designed for his beloved Esther's kin. "Let it be known across the kingdom," he declared, "that on the 13th day of the 12th month the Jews shall gather, a gathering not of sorrow, but of triumph." As the ink dried upon the scroll, the tides shifted, the very heavens rejoiced. Esther's heart leapt within her as she discerned the faithfulness of God unfolding through her. The despicable plot of Haman, once a spear poised against them, turned into a weapon of justice, where the adversary would reap the very harvest he had sown. With Mordecai rising in influence alongside Esther, the day of reckoning beckoned ever closer. Haman's gallows stood ominously in view, a stark reminder of evil's fleeting grip over creation. As the clouds shifted and thunder rumbled in the sky, it was evident that God's hand was directing every detail. Yet deep in the shadows of Shushan, Haman's heart raged against destiny. His plotting mind could already feel the sting of divine retribution, a confrontation awaiting him that would rend the fabric of his wicked designs. "Surely," he thought in his despair, "this cannot be the end." Steeped in prayer and communion with God, Esther knew a decisive moment was upon them. The hour of her destiny was at hand. Thus, upon her shoulders rested not only the fate of her ancestors, but the future of a nation. "The time has come for God's promise to unveil," she proclaimed, her voice breaking through the fear that sought to overwhelm her people. As the final strokes of fate wove through the tapestry of Shushan, one question loomed like a spectre of anticipation. Could it be that God was not finished with Haman yet? What further tests lay in waiting, hidden like a sacred treasure yet to be unearthed? The whispers of God's sovereign plan stirred in the air, stirring souls and hearts alike to draw closer to him. As the day of the Jews' anticipated gathering drew near, the atmosphere in Shushan pulsed with a mix of trepidation and hope. The royal decree echoed in every ear. Deliverance was at hand. Esther, now a beacon of faith, called upon the people to unite in prayer and supplication. "Gather and fast," she urged. "For 3 days and 3 nights let us plead for mercy and guidance." Her footsteps echoed through the city, drawing the hearts of the faithful to the forefront of their struggle. In the great courtyard of the palace, Mordecai spread the tidings of the new decree among the Jews, whose spirits had been heavy with despair. "God has turned our mourning into dancing. Let us prepare our hearts for victory," he proclaimed, his courage a balm for weary souls. Lit by conviction, the people responded with cries of praise, joining together to seek God in fervent prayer. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of his home, Haman brooded over his downfall. The gallows stood tall before him, a grim reminder of his intentions. His heart was now a battlefield, a place where pride warred against humility, where madness clashed with relentless rage. "Infamy shall not lay claim to me," he hissed into the silence. The sound of his own voice bounced back from the walls, mingling with his thoughts of revenge. "If this is not the end, there must be yet another plan. I will not rest until the Jews are destroyed." As night cast its shadow upon the kingdom, a divine slumber enveloped King Xerxes. In his dreams, images of the faithfulness of a people floated before him. A vision of Esther's sacrifice and Mordecai's loyalty stirred deep within him. Awakened by the warmth of divine truth, he sought the scrolls that chronicled his reign. "What has been done for the one who saved my life?" he questioned the scribes in the early hours of dawn. "Nothing has been rewarded to him, O king," they replied, a hint of confusion threading through their words. Xerxes' eyes narrowed with realization, determination flushing through his veins like the rush of a mighty river. "Then go, summon Mordecai." The course of justice was set, a path forged by divine providence. At that moment Esther, having fasted and prayed, leaned over her window. Through its latticed panes she glimpsed the rising sun, a radiant emblem of hope painting the sky. Her spirit soared as she beheld the promise of God reflecting through the turmoil surrounding her. "What mayhap awaits us?" she whispered, her heart full of wonder. "Will the hand of the Almighty guide us to triumph, or shall the shadows hold sway as they attempt to entrap us?" As the tension bubbled in Shushan, the people stood at the precipice of their destiny. The edict had set in motion a confrontation not merely with flesh, but with the very principalities of darkness. Soon, as the sun's rays pierced the veil of night, they would witness the culmination of a conflict that stretched far beyond their understanding, a confrontation defined by truth and deception. As Esther prepared to enter the king's presence once more, an echoing question lingered in the heart of Shushan. In what ways will the display of God's glory be made manifest in this hour? What divine mysteries lay veiled, waiting to be revealed through the trials of this moment? With the curtain of destiny drawn taut before them, one abiding truth remained. Even in the depth of evil's greatest schemes, God's providential hand was guiding each unfolding event toward his ultimate triumph. Would they stand firm, united under the banner of faith, and trust in his sovereign plan? The answers loomed, waiting to be discovered in the days that approached, a tapestry yet to be woven in the fabric of their lives. And so, the moment arrived when Esther knew it was time to confront the king once more. Gathering her courage like a mantle, she donned her royal garments, each thread speaking of her people's hope woven into her very being. As she stepped into the inner court, the brilliant sunlight streaming through the palace windows cloaked her in divine splendor, illuminating the path ordained before her. And Xerxes, seated upon his throne amidst the cerulean drapes and golden vessels, gazed upon her with interest, tempered by the echoes of urgency swirling in his heart. His mind, a labyrinth of thoughts, remembered the fate of Haman, and in this defining moment, he wondered what further considerations involved Esther, the queen whose courage had sparked a divine upheaval. "Queen Esther," he beckoned, his tone entrancing, "what is your request? It shall be given to you, even unto half my kingdom." Esther paused, her heart like a drum, as all the weight of her people pressed upon her shoulders. "O King Xerxes," she began, her voice steady, "if it pleases you, grant me the privilege to speak once again. I have found favor in your sight, and I beseech you, allow my life and the lives of my people to be spared. For we are marked for annihilation by the vile plot of Haman, a schemer beneath your very eyes." Gasps reverberated through the chamber, and the king's face transformed, fury dawning before he declared, "Who is this Haman that dares to plot such treachery against you?" With resolute clarity, Esther pointed toward Haman, who now stood shivering in horror, his arrogance stripped bare before the truth. "This wicked man is our enemy, who risks destruction upon the innocent," she proclaimed, her courage flowing unwaveringly from her faith. Every eye turned toward Haman, who felt the crushing weight of reality, a vice tightening with each passing breath. As clarity settled over the room, the storm of retribution rose in Xerxes' heart. "Take him, let Haman meet the very end he calculated for the faithful," he thundered, divine justice reverberating in his command. The guards seized Haman, dragging him from the royal court like a tempest that had overstepped its bounds, his own path now rallying against him. Esther turned toward the king once more, her heart aflame with urgency. "O king, though Haman's doom has come, the decree written against my people remains unbroken. Please, allow us the chance to defend ourselves against those who pose a threat to our lives." A murmur rippled through the assembly, and Xerxes, swayed by her compassion and valor, thought deeply. "The law cannot be revoked, but I shall grant you authority to protect yourselves. Let a new edict be written." As scribes put pen to parchment, spirits soared among the Jews, who began to gather hope from the ashes of fear. The dawn of a new day broke, where instead of death, life surged forth. As the message of the king's new decree flew through the land, a fire bloomed within the hearts of the people. They could rise united and strong, emboldened by divine intervention. In the days that followed, Esther and her people prepared for the day set aside for confrontation. Armed with faith as their shield and united by the gospel of deliverance, the Jews stood on the eve of their destiny. "God has heard our cries," Esther proclaimed, as she knelt in prayer with her family, her convictions igniting embers of resolve within each soul present. "We are not forgotten, for his covenant stands firm." At long last, the fateful day arrived, and the air crackled with anticipation. As the trumpets sounded and the community gathered, they felt the weight of history on their shoulders, a chance to turn the tide against despair. With every heartbeat, they proclaimed their faith, a defiant act against the darkness that sought to obliterate their legacy. On that day, the adversaries of the Jews rose in fear, accosted by the reality of the decree that had come forth from the royal throne. But the courage of God's chosen people reverberated through Shushan, a song of deliverance honoring the God who had orchestrated their salvation. As one, they charged forth, armed with spirit and resolve, determination painted across their faces like a holy seal. As they ventured into the fray, the Almighty's presence wrapped around them, guiding each movement and empowering their cries for victory. And so it was. A great and wondrous deliverance unfolded, as villains fell before their courage and deceit toppled under the weight of revealed truth. The enemies who had sought to extinguish the light of God's people faltered, outmaneuvered by the hand of Providence, as Esther stood unwavering at the forefront, a beacon for her kin. Haman's downfall transformed into a testimony echoing through the annals of history, laying bare the depths of divine justice. From that day forward, a celebration arose among the Jews, an everlasting reminder of God's faithfulness. And as they gathered year upon year to honor their deliverance, framing it with gratitude and faith, they etched Esther's name among the greats of history, a testimony of courage and an embodiment of hope for all generations. Therefore, beloved, remember this story, for it stands ever true. God's purposes shall prevail. In times of trial and tribulation, affirm your faith and share the light that shines from his very hearth. And now, having witnessed the profound might of the Lord through Esther's strength, you are invited to carry this message forward. Subscribe immediately to stay connected to God's Word. Do not miss the powerful biblical stories awaiting you. Leave a like now to help spread God's message through this testimony and comment your reflections, how this narrative of faith has impacted your spiritual journey. And remember, don't wait even one more second. Share this powerful story with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth today.